I was there from the beginning. It started in February 64 from memory.
We were going from near the beginning. Was either 64, 65.
I think I attended Listooder from about 1967.
I believe it was around about 1973, 74.
1974 to 78.
Yeah, I think I started going in 1978.
I went to Listooder shortly after I was converted at a mission, at the Faith Mission held down in Bartamacry.
I think I started going just after I got my driving test in 1995.
Back as far as 1996.
I suppose I must have been about 13 or so I've been going for 17 years. It was probably started 1996, 1997.
Well, I think I was 18 years old, as far as I can remember. I was thinking back, I think I was 18, so that's till, would that be 2002, 2003?
I started going when I was about 20, which is 12 years ago, so it'll be 2002.
I think it was probably 2003.
I think it was about 4 years back. Whenever I was starting first year, I'm going in the 5th year now, but whenever I was starting first year, I'd always heard about it and I was looking forward to it because my dad had been and friends that lived down the lane, one of their parents had been. So I've just been going to it since first year, so I'm going into my 5th year now.
Well, it was to reach after the mission that was held in, I think, 63. There was felt a great need among quite a number of people, not only the younger people but older people as well, that something should be done for the young people in the area.
Primarily it was to nurture young Christians, and to me that's a powerful thing. Young Christians do need that. You know, they need that safe environment.
But opening the Word of God and saying, this is what the Lord says. This is what it says here. And you know, and okay, we've got to make that relevant to where people live today, but it's fundamentally the same truth. It hasn't changed.
Yeah, it was invaluable. Like, I mean, I thank the Lord often for the days of the Listooder, you know, and I have a lot, you know, sometimes I think about it, you know, I get emotional because those were days that kept me on the straight road.
I always felt like I had to be there to grow, and that's definitely where growth took place. Yeah.
I came to Listooder as a very young Christian, not knowing very much, and also it was an opportunity for me to hear and to learn and to grow.
I think in many lives, and I speak personally, but certainly many lives, that's where a lot of us get grounded. You know, there were the opportunities just to share. You know, those nights, you know, while their speakers came, the nights that maybe do stand out. And not any one in particular, but the nights that stood out were the nights when perhaps everybody took part.
To give young people a chance to lead or to speak, and I think that's very important, because if you don't do it then, in 5 years' time, people, if you're asking them to get up and speak with fear, so Listooder isn't just feeding you, but it's building you up.
Just to hear the people you've been speaking to hear them get a chance to maybe to give a testimony, or indeed for some of them to do the Bible study, to preach, was very interesting. That maybe I wouldn't have heard them elsewhere, or they wouldn't have got that opportunity.
Normally starts off with a quiz, then the next thing is a testimony, then you're preaching.
Listooder was the first time I ever got up and told my testimony, because it was they had a faith mission. The faith mission came to do a mission at the hall, but on the Saturday night, Listooder was on, and they told everybody, Listooder just run as normal, but the faith mission took it. But I remember one of the faith mission ladies, I don't know who she was, she asked would somebody give their testimony because it was a youth meeting. And I remember Jonny Reid, or somebody asked me to do it, and I must have been only 14 at the time. And that was the first time, and I literally spoke for like 4 minutes.
Praying in public as well too. We used to have Bibles that we would pass around the room, around the circle, and if you didn't feel really it was for you, you just passed it on to the next person, and nobody really worried too much about that.
You know your turn's coming, you know, and you didn't have to say much, but it just learned you the discipline to pray in public.
I can remember us moving the seats into a circle a few times.
And you either had to pick a memory verse or pick a course or something like that. And it was your choice. And you got to say why you wanted it, and that's right. So it encouraged young people to be involved, you know.
Everyone got an opportunity if they wanted to read a verse of scripture, if they wanted to pray, or they wanted to say a wee word no one was discouraged. That was very important.
There's something deeply, special about that. There's something really good to use the talents and the gifts of the people within the hall.
It is sort of very intimidating to get up and do something like that, but Listooder sort of, sometimes the numbers might have only been 15, 20, and it really gives people an opportunity to do that.
Even if you got up and you getting up and you lost your place giving a testimony, or you made a mess, nobody said anything. Because they knew that you were fighting to do your best.
They probably weren't erroneous in any ways, but probably weren't very fluent and stammering and whatnot. And yet, withal, there was that encouragement. There was never an occasion. I don't ever remember an occasion when someone would have come to you, took you one side, and said, "That was absolutely rubbish. What were you doing there?" I think there was always an environment of encouragement and support.
Listooder young people were asked to go and take mission halls and services and stuff like that, and I was involved in doing that. Started giving a testimony, and then I progressed on to leading the service. I liked leading the service because that was easier. That was sort of you made mistakes, nobody knew about it.
Take a meeting at Crawford Mission Hall and to speak at a meeting, and I'd never done anything like that before. But well, what could you say? You didn't like to refuse, and I went along and done that, and that was a challenge because you had to prepare for it. You had to have sorted out what you were going to say, and you did the whole meeting to conduct. And I couldn't have been too old at that time, 17 maybe.
The mission that William Cunningham took really stands out very much in my head. I think it was decided that the Young People's Fellowship would try and run a mission, and it was totally run by the young people. Even William Cunningham himself was a member of the fellowship and all, and he spoke.
I was speaking to William Dick, and I couldn't remember that myself. He said we had a prayer meeting, and we were praying seriously about who should preach. And he said, "I'll never forget, you stood up and said, I believe with all my heart that I should preach at this mission." And I said to William, I wouldn't say that now.
And I don't think he had really a big lot of preaching experience, but
I was only saved in February, so we're only dealing here with a young Christian, months old. And every spare minute I had at home, I was studying my Bible, and had no interest in speaking in any form. But what I did have an interest in was testifying, because I knew I could do that. And one night, just prior to the mission, which we'll come to, as you say, Dr. Paisley had a huge campaign in Mr. Anderson's field outside Saintfield. And I had no way to go, but I was determined I wanted to go, so I rode to it on my bike. And Dr. Paisley was held back. He wouldn't come to a bit later. So they started to sing and to keep the thing going. Then whoever was leading it said, "Well, we're going to open the meeting." There were about 400 people there in the tent. "We're going to open the meeting, and if anybody would like to bring a word." So there's total silence. And the first time I spoke was at that mission. I spoke and gave my testimony. And also said how that the Listooder young people were going to have a mission soon.
The people, the whole countryside just talked about it. And it had a big impact upon, and all the young people took part, leading, testifying, and everyone was very eager and singing and inviting people along.
There were many saved, and it drew many young people. It also drew in older age groups, who probably, some of them I remember, neighbours and farmers who would never have been in through a mission hall door.
I can remember one or two nights, it was well filled every night. One or two nights there was people, or maybe it was Sunday afternoons, people couldn't all get into the hall. There were people standing out in the steps listening to the gospel.
As a result of the mission, I was invited to various halls in that locality. That lasted for maybe a year. I went and spoke to them, I've had some really wonderful meetings and times over the years, but none no better than what we had at that time. Because what can be better if the Lord is present and He's blessed? I mean, that is, no matter what church you're in, that is the peak. The Lord with His people blessing them. So it doesn't matter what age you are, or where you are, or who you are. If that happens,
you don't forget it. You just always got a presence that no matter how small or big, God was always there. Which is great.
It's not like a normal meeting you'd go to. I mean, there's when I was sort of 16, 15, used to go to youth fellowship and stuff. And youth fellowship was great and when I was slightly older as well, but it's just because it's a different environment.
To be honest, I probably thought it was quite boring at the start, if I'm being honest, because Listooder is so traditional, but as you get older, you learn to appreciate, there is something unique here and something wonderful.
It was a different sort of dynamic to church, and I think that was helpful too, because you can get very, I suppose, fixed about what Christian faith and Christian worship and what Christian meeting together is about.
You've got Christian people there leading it first and foremost, and then you've got Christian friends and stuff is there, and you talk about things and you discuss things, and it's because it's so informal, it's an enjoyable environment to be in. Church is great, but it's nice to have something else that's sort of out of a Sunday that you can actually see your friends and join in with fellow believers and sing and praise and learn about the scriptures as well.
Describe it in 3 words, I think one of those words would have to be helpful.
This is such a unique meeting. Out of anything I've been to, so unique would be the first one, definitely for me.
I always just think of Listooder as fun. I think of it as fantastic fellowship and good food at the end.
Encouraging.
Sound teaching. Good fellowship, godly fellowship, and John Reid on the pool.
Or we fellowship, or, well, I wouldn't have called it a fellowship in my day because I probably wouldn't have known what that meant. But it definitely was our wee hall.
I have a lot of respect for Listooder, and I can't really put it into words.
Listooder's probably impacted people's lives in a more deep, meaningful way than the folk who organised it really appreciate. I think that those who organised Listooder in those early days in the 70s and whatever, probably the ministry there that has been blessed and used by God in a way that far outstrips anything that they ever thought. I think it has an impact on people's lives that not only for time but certainly for eternity.
We never felt going along to it that it was something, oh no, it's this week, You always went along, expecting something to happen, and it was always good. I really look forward to it, No,
I must admit I enjoyed every night. I could say there wouldn't have been anything that I didn't like.
Never came away from Listooder, going, oh, that wasn't such a good meeting. You really enjoyed the meetings and you looked forward to them. And it was somewhere for you to go and have fellowship on a Saturday evening with other young people.
Something that sticks in my head is always like the Listooder barbecues. Always enjoyed them because it's always like really good desserts and always like.
You could come together and have a bit of a laugh, play a few games and stuff your face full of lots of different concoctions that different people have made.
Brian used to bring the barbecue in the back of the Jeep and get the mesh and all. I think he hated the responsibility, but he did quite like it.
A bit of volleyball and different things and going to Andy and Arse's if the weather's bad. If the weather's good, down to Delamont or wherever else, or Dundrum one year and stuff.
And that was an opportunity simply to meet people in a different background, a different environment. But yeah, that was all part of it as well. And yeah, you maybe broke then. Yeah, it was finished up and you had a 2-month break and you didn't start back to September again.
We looked forward to the Christmas party at Listooder.
Played lots of games and things, and some of us dressed up and done acts and things and really made a fool of ourselves.
They were fun, and I think it's this idea that, that everybody took part, William and everybody, they all took part in it.
Great evening, and we could all let our hair down and it was a time for having fun.
I suppose for me, one of the special things would have been the Christmas dinner. Every year that kind of brought everybody together, and even some people who had maybe moved on a few years ago coming back almost.
We went to Rosemary Jane's for years.
And then back to Thomas and Joanne's afterwards, and Samuel was a wee tote running around.
Like a madman. Now, if you look at Samuel now, not like that, but he was running about like a madman, and he was roasting, and I just remember his red face. That's all I remember.
So the Christmas dinner starting at Rosemary Jane's and then Castlewell and Castle. There was always something that people looked forward to at that. Not just the food, not just, the fellowship, but there was always an event that was going to be part of that dinner, whether it was going to be a quiz, whether it was going to be a game show, whether it was going to be some obscure challenges that maybe the Dick cousins had come up with.
You always split the party into 4 teams, and you did the Listooder Strongest Man a few times, which is always a good bit of banter.
Cards underneath the seats, for different coloured cards. So there's maybe somebody who you don't usually speak to at Listooder. You get a chance, usually, that you'll not be with your friend, likely. You'll be in a team, it's good for, I don't know, people at work should probably pay money for it.
One year we did, what's that game? Not catchphrase. Family Fortunes. And it was my turn I had to go out and wait. As soon as I got back in, William and Rebecca, was it Rebecca Streel was on my team? And she kept whispering socks. So she kept saying socks to me. So the first question you asked me, I can't remember the question. It was like a type of fruit or something, and I said socks because she kept whispering it. But the second question, the top answer was socks. So I got it for the second question. But I remember, that's all I remember her saying. All I could think about was socks, socks, socks.
Flashing through my mind are the different images of people trying to light, a whole set of candles with one match and making a fool out of themselves, or even staring competitions, or the game show. Was it Family Fortunes? Yeah. I had my jacket on and I was presenting that.
Everybody loved the dinners, and they loved it because it was Christmas, the fire was going. It was you just knew when you got the Listooder dinner, it was always on the sort of the 19th, 20th of December. You kind of knew you were finishing work, or maybe you had finished work, and the Listooder dinner was coming, and it was going to be Christmas, and it was brilliant. And those were some of the greatest memories. Was going to the dinners. Yeah.
It's just endless food. It's just endless. I mean, no one desserts the rollout. Seriously, I would eat probably. I'm ridiculous, hence my bad health. No, but it's just endless food. It was just the quality, and whoever started that just needs a big pat in the back.
Just grateful, grateful. Always a great night. You always look forward to it. You really did look forward to it, genuinely.
For me, Listooder was 2 huts. It was the Tin Hut at Listooder, and it was the Pizza Hut in Carryduff.
We really wanted somewhere where people could go in a batch of 20 or 25, and you didn't want to go too far, because if you went too far, people would just say, "Nah, I'm not." But sort of the nearest place was Carryduff, and that time of night, you wouldn't really be getting there to maybe 10 o'clock.
20 of us coming in, and they'd always run out of some type of deep pan pizza, so there wasn't much left.
It's kind of like a rule of thumb. We'll go to Listooder, then we'll go to Pizza Hut. You may not even have had pizza. You may have just went, well, just for the crack, I suppose.
The waiters and waitresses always rolled their eyes when we came in, because they knew this was going to be another serious crowd who were going to make a lot of strange concoctions of pepper and salt and maybe chili sauce, chili flakes in a glass, and either force somebody to drink it or pay somebody to drink it, or just leave it for the waiters and waitresses to tidy up afterwards.
Pizza Hut used to have these pebbly plants. We used to put pebbles in people's Coke, and we were horrendous, but it was good. It was good crack. But we used to do that. Everybody used to go from Listooder to Pizza Hut.
But the thing that changed was when Listooder changed, in that they started to give out a few biscuits and maybe a wee drink after the meeting. All well and good, and I'm sure the people, the powers that be, thought it was a nice idea. Because sometimes we did debate, and but the thing about those debates were we always knew we had to be at Pizza Hut before a certain time. But as soon as you introduced biscuits and juice, you knew people were going to sit on. And 9 times out of 10 from then on, it meant we weren't going to go to Pizza Hut.
I think they basically closed down because we didn't go there anymore.
We all headed up into Ballynahinch and parked and down into Dixon's, and we were there until they threw us out.
There's always a bit of carrying on and hooling about too.
There was tables with high backs, and everybody, you got into the little group that you were in, and you were in that round that table, and you're almost concealed from everyone else, and the chat was good, but then somebody was maybe on the next table, and then when things got a little rowdy, or things got a little raised, then there might have been peas went over the top of it.
So I'm sure they were ready to throw us out sometimes, but yes, Maybe they were glad of our custom, I don't know. But yes, that was definitely the place to go after Listooder, yes.
A lot of fellowship out of that as well, and crack.
Yeah, obviously it helped everybody gel, you know, it definitely is very important. Yeah, definitely. Like, even nowadays, we go back to the tiers, usually. It's very important, you know. You can just have the meeting. Sure, you can talk for 20 minutes afterwards and then you're way home, but if you go back somewhere else, you're getting longer, you're talking to different people, so it's very important.
Remember going to like the Dicks really early on, Moy and Williams, and then then it was really the Mateers or Judith's, Nolan Elmas, you know, and all those people are associated with the Listooder. So you all went back to their house and they had big houses, so it was everybody piled in, and it would have been like, I remember like coming back and Philip and Graham and people, and there would, you know, 20, 30 people there.
The younger ones are sitting in one room, and the not so old ones that still think they're young ones sit in the other room.
Well, we did tramp suppers as well too. At least that's where they were called. I don't know where you still call them, tramp suppers, where we'd start off in somebody's house with an appetizer, then it would be a main course somewhere else and a sweet somewhere else.
Trips away, I mean, there's been lots of them. I always remember the trip we went in Strangford Lough on the boat. It was freezing and, you know, shouting, screaming, laughing. I think I couldn't speak for a week afterwards, you know, because it was so cold and sore throat and everything.
Yeah, I went to the zoo, you know, who can forget that Belfast Zoo is the hilliest place in the world. Poor Kyle Boyd. Yes, we just sort of, you know, I don't know how, anyway.
I remember going to Shane's Castle, and the wee steam train used to be there in those days.
Rathlin Island. I think it was we went in this like wee tiny boat over to Rathlin, but there was nothing to do when you got to Rathlin. It was just the island, and then you had to wait for the boat back.
We went Alton Towers sort of in the later years. That was awesome because you'd never been on a trip with Listooder. So I remember doing that. It was so good because basically I got all the rides first because I use a wheelchair. So it was brilliant. So me and Neil, like with here, we're just flat out and everything. And James Dean was raging about this. Still a wee bit raging about it.
Out in the M&Ds was the day of a Covenant parade in Belfast.
That was a really good day because it almost felt like we were going away on holidays because we got the boat, and then like it felt like it was so much longer than a day. It really felt like we'd been away for an entire weekend or something.
I think it was me and Rebecca Hutton were in, like, we just kept, everybody else had already stopped going on rides and all because they were starting to get a bit bored, but it was me. I remember going up and down like the, I forgot what you call it, it's like a big water slide. It's one where you go around a couple of times, but I remember just going on that there just constantly and then just sprinting in between just to get back on it again.
Youth weekends were fantastic. And I think it grew, Chris, as a believer, I think we grew more over that because you saw other people, and not just on a Saturday night, but you saw them, you know, over a weekend and how they responded, how they did things. And you could see that these people were genuine in what they believed.
I do remember going to Belial. I had a weekend down there, and it was quite something, you know. I do remember one fella, and he just went to bed with his boots on. I think he thought it was safer that way.
Well, I can remember us going to Kilkeel. That would have been the first one. And Sandy had just said to me last night he can remember, he reckons the elderly gentleman that ran the place we went to stay in Kilkeel, can't just remember the name of. We must have taken 5 years of his life with the carry-ons that went on.
I remember them having pillow fights, and the pillows were feather pillows. So you can imagine what happened. And then they decided to hoover them up, but there was no bag on the hoover, like, so they were in one end and out the other. And I think that same weekend we had to go to Bangor to buy screws to get the wardrobe doors back on again before we left.
And they would have brought different people along to speak at the weekends, and you always came away again refreshed in the Lord.
I can remember asking questions, you know. I remember the question, I don't know why it sticks in my head, but I remember asking William one time, William or Noel, about where paradise was. Yeah, you know, talked about the thief going to paradise. And you know, and again, he took that effort to make a genuine answer, trying to explain it to me. But you know, having that freedom as a young person on a weekend to be able to do that.
I can remember staying in a house overlooking, I don't know if it was a harbour, but there was a big green out in front of it and the sea beyond it. And there was this little man who came to take the weekend. Now, he was quite a scary little man, and I didn't really know who he was then, but I've had lots of dealings with him since that, in relation to other things. But it turned out he was John Moxon.
John was a lovely little chap. He wasn't, in fact, he was a little chap, and but I remember him and just his enthusiasm for sharing faith and just sharing the love of God, really, in a sense.
We would have went up to help him in the coffee bar.
John Moxon became very paramount because not only did we go to Newcastle, we went to Portrush with John as well. So we did. So and that was. So it was very significant the amount of work we did with John and then John got involved and did the teachings and maybe did a range of teachings over a number of weeks in the winter at Listooder.
One night he came along and John must have been about 3'7.5" or something like that. Yeah, well, he's probably taller than that, but he seemed like that. And he got up to speak, but he said that when he stood up to sing the first hymn, he happened to be in the second row, and the chap in the first row was a guy called Sandy Boyd, and Sandy was about 6'4", and John, when he got up to speak, he said the whole room went dark when he stood up because this chap in front of him blocked out the light.
A group from the Listooder young people went, and John did a week of teaching. Well, it was a long weekend of teaching, and we went and we stayed in Methodist Hall, slept rough, on sleeping bags, and that was the first. There was a bomb went off that night, and the telephone exchange was just across the road, which was the first bomb ever of the Troubles. And Noel and I lifted from the ground up into the air and banked down again with the bomb going off, and we couldn't understand what it was because bombs weren't known in those days. And of course, it progressed forward that was a bomb. There, it set a bomb and in the telephone exchange just across the road from us.
The meetings were always excellent and very spiritual, very uplifting and upbuilding, and fellowship was always there before and after the meetings as well.
It was so sound, and the teaching every time you went was always very good. It never lapsed. Every week by week, it was always good. So definitely, it could only be a positive influence in my life. Definitely.
We sang out of songs of victory. We used the Little Yellow Elim chorus book. The piano was the only instrument. There was nothing. No, there was no big. Let's try this and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, we'll do something different. I think we simply did what we did because what we were doing was working and didn't need changed.
Regardless of where you are, we're all using the Bible. It stands, and the words. I can remember the first verse, but I'm not going to sing it.
The course book's great. It's like you actually can open it and actually pick a few familiar hymns. The other book, it was like, flip me, I have no idea. No, the course book's very good.
The Bible stands like a rock undaunted. Even just you can just stop there. That's it. Mid the raging storms. We've all had storms. I've had storms. Absolutely.
There was always a good variety of speakers. Different ages. Weren't afraid to have older speakers. Didn't feel that they had to be young speakers for young people, and many of the best speakers were, in fact, the older speakers that came along.
So many things that young people find difficult, and Listooder has covered a whole lot of issues so they have over the years.
It makes it more targeted towards your own age, and it makes it more effective.
There was one time during university and I was worried about studying or doing something, and some guy, I can't even remember who it was, I never remember the speakers were terrible, but I remember he spoke on worry, and it was just so good. It was for me that night, and I remember that meeting specifically. I can't really remember what he spoke on, but I know I have verses and that's where they come from.
The people who come to Listooder usually are very systematic in how they go through teaching. That I know I really enjoy Trevor Matthews and the likes of Pastor Crichton and I think Jonathan Ray this year, who they took a passage and they went through verse by verse and they told you what the verse meant.
Trevor Matthews would have been very special, just his manner of speaking, great with younger people, but also just way of taking quite complex things, dividing them up, explaining them and applying them.
I think he was just very very relatable and very clear in what he was saying and very practical. in what he was saying, but also he brought in his own experiences.
I remember there was a woman a couple of months ago, Colin Tinsley's wife. I remember just like, I found it really interesting, just the way they met. It was just so strange, like the language barriers and all involved, and it just shocked me.
I think it was the man from the Christian Seamen's Mission, and he looked like Captain Birdseye.
I don't think there was very many with Sarah that night, and he had like hundreds and hundreds of them wee slides, and he was so, I don't know, he's like so funny, but you weren't sure whether you're supposed to laugh out loud, but you couldn't like help but laugh out loud. It was just so random. Random would be the word for him, but a real character. Like, it was a great meeting, but he was just so funny.
I just remember the warmth of that man and his hunger for evangelism, and that stayed with me.
I remember John Harris used to come from Ballygowan and speak, and I remember John coming along talking. Been there a few times. I don't know why he sticks in my memory, maybe because he was somebody from Ballygowan, that I knew. And he would have been a man in our background as a young person growing up in the church down there.
Tim McGrath done it. It was really, really good, and I felt it was very applicable. And Tim's a good preacher, and I really enjoyed it. And I can't remember the details of the sermon, but I know that I went home and was thinking about exactly what he was talking about, as you don't always do in meetings.
The first time I ever heard Alan Bartley speak was at Listooder, and he's just one man, and I'm not blowing him up, but I never heard preaching like that for a long time. Like, it was very, very powerful preaching, and he was giving his testimony as well, and it just really stayed in my mind, that meeting. It was a very, very powerful meeting.
Most weeks it might have been something different, so there was always a different approach, or you were introduced, I think, to mission and missionary organisations, so it wasn't the same every week.
10 years ago, you had a player from Linfield and a player from Glentoran. They came, and it was good for like myself, because I like football, and these two they're both Christians. One played for Linfield, one played for Glentoran, and he's got them out. I actually led that meeting that night. I was asked to do it. And my friend Sammy, he got asking them questions. So that was really good, because sometimes you go down and watch them on Saturday and you see these boys playing, and there they were in the hall.
The McAllister family was Bob and Alma McAllister, who were missionaries in the Congo, and their family, their children were with them out in the Congo, and the family would sing. I think Mrs. McAllister is dead now, and Bob's still alive as far as I know. He's in Armagh, but they came along, but they would tell stories about their sharing their faith as missionaries, and that intrigued, that just really created an appetite within me to want to share as well too.
I do remember, was it Sharon's uncle, is it Robin Long? I remember him speaking, about the work of open doors he was doing, and I remember thinking, it was really interesting, and that was one that just came to my mind, sort of challenging, made me think, flip, would I do something like that?
Listooder a lot of the time did feel like just a little hut in the middle of nowhere, but the connection that we had with Dave and Libby Morrison and New Tribes Missions was something very special. You were able to go to Listooder, and even though they were on the other side of the world, you were able to ask about them. These are in the days before Skype. You were able to ask about them, see how they were getting on, and people were genuinely interested in them, and we prayed for them. We almost felt like we were their sending organisation in a way.
Always a fun factor to it as well. Like, it was serious in that what they were doing and what they were saying was very serious, but it was done in a light-hearted way, and there was always a fun element to it, yeah.
The night that the speaker actually couldn't find the meeting, which probably doesn't happen that often for meetings, that he had left his house intending a time, he knew where he was going, he knew what time he had to get there at, but he just could not find it. And no matter how hard he searched or asked for directions, he still couldn't find the place and had to give up, admit defeat, and go home.
I remember, when I first started, Barbara had this kind of navy fisherman's hat, and one time someone found a navy fisherman's hat outside, and they were like, "Well, Barbara, is that yours?" And she was like, "No, it's not mine." So they hung it up, and they're like, "Oh, maybe someone will get it," and I think it's still there.
I think any of my funny memories of Listooder all revolve around Ross Greer.
Well, there was one time, I remember, I think it was 2 years ago or a year ago, when Samuel Jackson was doing the quiz.
And it was a taste quiz that you answered a question, you came up.
He had cups of different weird stuff, just plastic cups filled with cheesecake, can't stand it, or other weird stuff.
And Ross was blindfolded, and I think it was chocolate or something we'd given him.
So I'm like, by the way, Samuel, I'm allergic to milk and eggs, etc. And then I started like listing up all pile of stuff.
And he acted as if he was allergic to chocolate, and I could have throttled him that he had just getting on like that.
It's a night that will go down in history, and everyone knows what you're talking about when you say the devil's mouse or the devil's friend. You know it's that night.
Oh my goodness, I hate mice. I just remember that meeting. It was like it was running up and down the aisle beside me, and it was like, seriously, please can we stop the meeting?
It was strange because I didn't clock the mouse at the beginning. All I noticed, I think I'd sort of zoned out a bit. Apologies for that.
I do remember who it was, poor fella, you know, and he just came up, quite quick-witted now, in fairness to him, he just...
That mouse is the devil's friend. And the place you could have heard a pin drop. And I think there was a sense of disbelief. Number one, that there was a mouse. Number two, that it was the devil's friend. Because it's hard to mix those two. I don't believe the mouse was the devil's friend, but who knows? I know where he was coming from. I assume it was because it was the distraction, and maybe he assumed that was the devil distracting people from his sermon.
Yeah, he was quite quick-witted about it. Of course, half the women were up on the seats, so who can forget the mouse?
Whenever I was going as a teenager, like, I thought it was a really big hall, but see, whenever I went into it one time years later, it was tiny.
And it is a wee hall just out in the middle of the country, just sort of remote in some senses. It's not like in a big city or a town.
Sitting in the middle of absolutely nowhere. If you said to someone, where is Listooder, they probably couldn't tell you. There was. And I suppose nothing. No mod cons. It's a tin mission hall.
Well, really, I would have thought you couldn't have got a more deserted looking wee place. And when you put when you think of its location, and that it really isn't on a main thoroughfare, you have to find your way up roads, depending, of course, what road you come in on. But it would have been, if you were to pick a place to have meetings, it wouldn't be it, would it? And yet it worked.
I think it just has character. Like, it's not every day you say, I'm going to go to the Tin Hut. People think you're referring to like one of those old like bombing huts from World War II.
It had always seemed to be dark whenever you approached the hall.
I think if somebody showed me a picture of Listooder in the daylight, I actually wouldn't recognise it because I've never seen it in the daylight. I'm always walking in like pitch black.
I remember the first time you go to Listooder when you're driving. It's always a big thing. Get in the car and go to Listooder and trying to navigate up the hill because it's actually surprisingly narrow.
I remember parking one night and thinking, I did quite good there. Then I went to open the door and the door was like up tight against that high curb thing. And I was like, oh.
You used to have to park up and then like tiptoe to try and step out of the muck.
Sometimes you get that strong chicken smell. If it's a particularly good night, you get the strong chicken smell. You start that slow gradient up the hill, just to get you worked up.
It was a really fairly basic building. There wasn't anything frivolous about it, really, in a sense.
Really? There's a meeting in here?
I think we just accepted it. It was just Listooder and that was it,
It's something like a coziness when you're inside. I think especially in the winter time, you got the heat on, you're inside. Just something about it. It's like being at your granny's, maybe.
The wooden panel, I don't know, 1960s, 70s paneling, the nice the little verses with cottages on them. It's like going into your grandmother's house. But Listooder, it's a very homely sort of place. But the thing that probably stands out emotional at Listooder is the seats,
the bench seats,
the uncomfortable seats.
There's no cushions. It's no comfort. It's very puritanical that way.
And if you got an end one with the studs in it, like it was really uncomfortable. Yeah, so you always knew after a few weeks, like, to go and sit in the middle of the seat.
But it used to be that it was cold and the seats were hard. So we've got heating now. Usually I'm actually too warm, but the seats are still hard. But that's probably not a bad thing because we've been doing stuff all day on a Saturday and you're feeling a bit tired, so it stops you from sleeping, which is good. The kitchen, it's kind of like you're out preparing the food and you're thinking, what is that? Is that a bit of dirt? Is that a mouse dropping? What is that?
And I think the addition of a toilet outside, that is a big addition. There wasn't one of those when we were going. So if you needed to go, you didn't go,
I've still never used the toilet because I'm scared because it's outside.
Who goes there? Seriously. I think, is it still outside? Yeah. You probably just don't go. go before you leave the house and hope you don't need to go.
I've always kind of wondered what it looked like, but I never heard good reports and I've never been there. That's the only part of Listooder I've never explored.
The door, it never changes.
When you're at the meeting, you're always waiting on that noise. You hear the door click. I think I do remember being late once, and the door sometimes is very stiff to get open, so that's always embarrassing. You're trying to barge away.
You stand and you kind of you've got the finger on the whatever, and you're pushing, and you're like, this isn't going. So it's either the shoulder or the foot.
I remember the latch door. Listooder is the son. It's the only place that has a latch door, and it's the only place where when the latch goes, everybody turns round. If you're late, it's a nightmare. And generally people are, like Gordy Ritchie.
And I'm not the most punctual person, so usually when I get down, there's no spaces. I always end up having to park a good bit away, and I always end up parking outside a puddle. And I step out of my car and into a puddle, and the socks and things are soaking, and then I have to trip down and always stick my ear to the door.
You knew you were on to a winner if you could still hear singing. If you were walking through those gates at the bottom and you could hear singing, you knew you were on time. Well, relatively speaking.
It's very, very hard to open the door without making a noise. Even to try and open the door, or somebody else tries to help you as well, and then it's just like, oh, this is just not going to work.
If you were late, everyone knew because they could hear it, and everyone turned around to see who was coming in late.
Some people didn't even have to look around. They just knew. They just glanced at the clock on the right-hand side and knew that's John. That's Gordy. They've arrived.
That's the price you have to pay for being late.
Maybe getting car parking spaces wasn't a problem, particularly in early days when there was an older age group going. People weren't getting dropped off.
There's a bit of a rush sometimes to get into the car park, and then of course you always get somebody come up and jam you in. If you got there first, then you get jammed in. So you were better coming late and parking out in the road because you could get away then.
First time I went to Listooder with Stephen, I had to bring Stephen along to Listooder, and it was like, we're coming down the old St. Field Road, and it's like, right, Stephen, you're taking the next road on the right. Stephen wasn't really slacking any. Stephen doesn't really slack in general, but next thing it was like on with the handbrake, and I actually thought we were going to die and not even make it to the meeting. I thought I'll never going to get him here, but yeah, that's one memory of getting to Listooder. So we're obviously running late that night.
I can remember Ginger William Pentland going round the corner coming up from the hall and swinging around that big bend. We were coming at 90-degree tillet, and he went round on a car with 2 wheels off the ground. He did, literally.
Philip Dick and Graham Dick were going to the Listooder then as well, and they were about 24 and we were about 16, so we thought they were class because they were a bit older than us, and they would have took us places and stuff. And obviously Philip had a BMW at the time, a 1 Series, and if we got to go in his car to the Listooder or somewhere after that, we thought it was brilliant. But the best thing was he used to do donuts. Don't know if anybody knows this, but they're going to know about it now. He used to do donuts at the Triangle. So you used to come out of the Listooder, and at a good evening, people would have been out just standing around, hanging about. And Philly used to get the car out and do a wheel spin just at the Listooder, and then do a couple of donuts, and then drive off. And you just thought, when you were 16, you just thought this was the best thing ever.
Never worried about how you were going to get. There was always someone to take you, and you never worried about how you were going to get home. It was always. And the cars, you were packed in.
William would have come down, or Noel, and picked us up on a Saturday night, and away we went to Listooder.
A full car load. And when I say a full car load, I mean maybe 10 or 11 in a car. There was no health or safety in those days.
We were maybe 4 along the back, and there was 3 layers, so that's 12. And then in the front there was about a driver, and then on the passenger side there was another 3 maybe.
The one that sticks in my mind is the night we went to Kilkeel. We went down to Kilkeel, it must have been the Free Presbyterian Church down there, it must have been a youth meeting or something. But we're in these awesome princesses, whatever they were, the 1800s. And I think we counted 13 in one car. I mean, you just couldn't do it today. It would be total no-no, you just wouldn't allow to do it. And we were so crushed in this thing that when we got to Newcastle, just beyond Newcastle's the quarries just beyond there, we had to get out, stretch our legs, and then pile back in again and go on.
Oh yeah, one particular moment sticks in my head with William McDowell. Bringing me home one night, I think there was 4 of us across the back seat in a Cortina, and coming to our house, there's 2 bad yumps. So there is. Well, when he hit the first yump, he hit it that hard that the door opened, and I started to fall out. If somebody hadn't grabbed me, I would have been out.
Post 16 age group, sometimes there's less things on organised to go to, and maybe at that stage you start to move into more of a leadership role within some things within the church, and therefore I think Listooder acted for me almost as something that I could continue go to right in through my 20s, but I didn't have while I could help out of things, I didn't have a real responsibility, and I could still relax in terms of say outings and the weekends that we went on. I didn't have any burden of responsibility, and that I could relax and enjoy it.
It was just like a youth meeting to me, except it was smaller and you got to speak to everybody and, you know, you got to know people better. It wasn't like a big youth rally or anything, you know, it was more intimate.
I think it's because it wasn't really like church. It wasn't church. Even though you were going and you were having a meeting and there would have been a guy speaking on holiness or faith or whatever, but it was easier because it was like a lot more relaxed.
Well, it was only one Christian youth fellowship in the whole area that was on a Saturday night.
I always loved Saturdays because Saturdays was going along to Listooder.
Any other meetings you go to, it's always midweek, but Listooder's Saturday night. And I always specifically, most weeks, if somebody was praying, especially if it was like one of our own meetings, everybody always prayed, you know, thank you, Father, that we met here tonight and we're not out in the world, you know, and it's true.
It was great to have company, Christian company that I got to grow up with, you know, because the big challenge for young people is, you know, who do they hook up with and leads them astray? I had the blessing of not being led astray.
These are people that influenced me. These are people that maybe I influenced as well too. And people just to be easy around actually as well.
I would say that influence down there was a big help to me becoming a Christian, because we never went to like to church or anything like that.
I suppose it's hard to know how many. I'm not going to say, you know, I'm not going to say it's a meeting for Christians, because it's probably harsh, you know, but because I'm sure there's been unsaved in, you know. I mean, I know there's been friends of mine in who are unsaved, still unsaved, you know, but you just hope it's someday even something they heard there or wherever, you know, that, you know, but. There was a mission on at the school as well. We went to St. High School, which it is now, and there was a man had come, I can't remember his name, but definitely that was the first thing that sort of hit me. And for years and years and years, I had been trying to get somebody to explain to me how I become a Christian. And they were telling me, but nothing seemed to, it didn't get I couldn't figure it out how easy it was. And then this meeting at the school, it seemed to sort of sink in a bit just how easy it could be. And then there was a meeting one night at the wee hall, and that's whenever I was coming home that night, and we had to walk along the railway line in the dark and all the rest of it. And I was coming along there and the moon was out, and I was on my own that night. And I can just remember asking the Lord into my heart, coming along there under the moonlight.
One night at Listooder in particular, I renewed my faith in the Lord Jesus Christ as I felt weak, and that particular night. And from then on, my study and everything was much more important to me. And I studied better from what I'd heard that night. And my growth was much better.
My older sister, we were waiting for William to come for us, and she was asking me, "May, have you ever thought about becoming a Christian?" And I says, "Yes, I have, but I have already done that." I told her then that I had done it a couple of weeks ago, and she says, "Well, I'm going to do it tonight."
Even though I was growing older and all, you were learning more and spiritually learning and maybe getting into deeper things in the Bible and all that. And because there always was other young people there who were that wee bit more mature than I was, and then yet others as well who hadn't just only maybe become a Christian for quite recently.
From not being brought up in a background that was a church background and things like that. I basically got my teaching there with the young people.
I went on in church life, you know, to be involved in church life a deep and a very, you know, in at different levels, you know, at deacon level, at eldership level, at youth level. I've done Baptist camps for years. But you know, when I reflect on a lot of the stuff that I've used, a lot of the teaching ideas I've had, you know, the fundamentals about what we do, I can link most of that right back to Listooder.
It does give you a zeal to go away, and then the passage you're looking at, how did you get that out from that? You know, things that you would, okay, when you say that, I get that. But if you were just reading that at 10:30 at night, and you're, you know, just way over your head, but they really would give you something that, no, you do have to go look at that more.
I don't ever remember leaving Listooder feeling like, you know, I hadn't learned something, which is a difficult thing to master these days.
It left an imprint on your mind and in your heart and in your life and just the way you live, and it leaves an imprint. And but there's other imprints coming on, you know, as all right through life, and we're constantly being molded. We're all works in progress.
People came there from whatever background that they came, and the thing was, it was friendship and it was fellowship, and that was growing together. I think that was probably the unique thing. It wasn't owned by any particular brand of Christian denomination. That we were there as young people, as young Christians, and we knew we were from different churches. But what brought us together was that love of Christ, the desire for fellowship together.
Well, the whole interdenominational thing to me as a whole was an important thing about Listooder. Not that it was mentioned, but the point being is the fact that it wasn't mentioned, it wasn't an issue. So you had young people coming along there who were coming from different church backgrounds.
You met a lot of people from other churches.
You're meeting people who go to a congregational church, who go to a Baptist church.
There was that opportunity to share your views, and I would say that, you know, as a young person, I felt safer at that stage in life to be able to do that more than even in church life today. You know, you go to a church, there's a theological position within a church. You know what that position is. To step outside of that can sometimes be, you know, could be seen the wrong way.
I grew up in the Presbyterian setting, and I enjoyed listening to other perspectives of understanding church life and Christian behaviour. I found that good for a young person to open up their minds.
At a personal level, it just encouraged me to look out more rather than to look in. And I think that's been something that's, these are formative years really, in a sense, teenage years, particularly early teenage years. And if you have an influence then, it often sticks without life. And for me that was actually very important, because it has encouraged me to look out and be open to people from other churches, as it were, who are very much a Christian as I am, essentially.
You used to have good conversations, you know, not just about, like scripturally and about things. And because people come from different backgrounds, you know, I wouldn't say it got heated, but it got interesting.
Listooder was a great place to be able to come to other Christians and to understand great doctrines. One of the things that we often take for granted is the Trinity. We just assume that everyone understands the Trinity. But Listooder was a place that you could come to and say, without fear of somebody laughing, what is the Trinity about? Explain to me the Trinity, or help me to understand it, or give me some resources.
I think we spent to 11:30 at night, you know, discussing things, and that's something I have to be very thankful for, that you took the time whenever I was younger, and you still take the time to discuss things or questions I've had.
Some nights you sing 11:15 at Listooder, and I'm sure you should go on longer if needed to, but no, that's what's good about it. It's like you're never pushed out the door.
I think Listooder is a safe environment to be able to learn, because you're able to ask those questions. You're able to understand more about your great God. You know, you're able to ask questions that in other environments would be seen as silly, and yet you learn so much through that, because people understood where you were, and oftentimes had been there before you.
It didn't matter if you were like 13 or 24. Like, you think about that. Whenever I started going 14, 15, and Philip and Graham Dick were 24, 25, like, it's a good 10 years but like everybody still went, and everybody got the same level of enjoyment out of it.
I think it probably took me a while in that I didn't come from maybe the Saintfield Crossgar area, and therefore I wouldn't have known that many there, and so it probably took me a while to build up those relationships, get to know people over a number of years through different Listooder events and the different social events and things like that.
Never just be left sitting on your own. You know, you walk in there even on your own, somebody will come and talk to you, you know, because that has happened. You know, there's people have probably walked in and not really too sure, and, you know, but it's so friendly.
It wasn't just one person coming to speak and say hello and welcome and all the rest of it. I just really felt part of the family that was there very quickly, which was brilliant.
I had brothers and sisters and all at home, but these ones here were my brothers and sisters in Christ, my Christian ones.
Gave me a base for a youth, you know, friendship and teaching and, you know, the social aspect of it as well, because I wouldn't have had many Christian friends.
You have to be the church, so to speak, like it says in the Bible. You don't go to a church, you are the church.
To me, it has to be the people and it has to be the fellowship, and the fellowship was good. You know, I never found it to be a cliquey meeting. You know, I always felt that everybody went along. They were always open, and everybody talked to everybody else. You know,
I think that's because it's not too big. Because when things are too big, that people definitely get into cliques. But if everybody's in there together, if there's like one 11-year-old, one 17-year-old, one 21-year-old, they're probably going to talk to each other because that's all they have, but it's not a bad thing.
I don't remember any problem. Yeah, I found them, all the young ones who went, William and Noel and so many others, there were the Huttons. I can't remember them all, but they were all very friendly and very down to earth. No, I felt at home.
Everyone there is like-minded, hopefully Christian, and that sort of way. So, I mean, if they're not Christian, they're going to learn about how to become a Christian and why they should become a Christian. So, and if there's plenty of people there, they're so easy going that you could talk to them about anything. So you're not gonna miss, you know, anything out. You can get all bases covered, and you just enjoy your time there.
It was friendship, and a lot of our friends went, and it was somewhere where we met, and that was nice. And it was encouragement because, as I said earlier, particularly times that we spent praying together and sharing together and bouncing off things of each other, because we were all the same sort of era. Whenever you went, you were a bit younger, most of them were older, but then it got to be, then you were one of the older ones.
I suppose it was really maybe 3 or so years back whenever we reached a point where I think a large number of younger ones came in. Maybe it was at that stage where I felt my role in some ways had changed a little bit from being a younger one who was just purely attending and didn't have any role in any sense. But whenever the younger group came in, and all of a sudden there was a slight switch from being around the middle age group maybe to being one of the older ones and one of the ones who've been going for quite a long time, and maybe having the role of, yes, trying to do whatever people have done for me to make me feel welcome and to try and get me involved in things, to do that the same for everyone's coming through.
There was that kind of mantle was being passed down along the line, and it was more a privilege actually to be part of that rather than some sort of burden in a sense.
I always try to talk to the younger ones. There's a couple of wee fellas who don't even know their names. Just talked to them one night and was talking about football, and then they said they didn't do football, and then I found out that they're from a farming background, so that helped.
This is awful that have you a meeting that stands out in your mind. No, I can't. Do you have pranks? Yes, there are a couple of pranks that I know, and that is that there's something seriously wrong when that is the case.
Signs used to get turned round in roads. 30-mile-an-hour signs get turned the other way round. Potatoes got stuck up some people's exhausts and that sort of thing, which didn't really help the car when it started. So yes, there were various sort of pranks that happened during those years.
My dad tells of Andy Mateer putting hymn books in the piano and making Elizabeth play like dud notes.
But of course to us that was more fun.
The beginning of September was always the opening meeting of the year, and so you went and prepared for it. And I remember the piano at the front, the piano stool with a little angle on it, and energetically and enthusiastically polishing that seat. And so in the evening of the meeting, when Elizabeth went to play the piano, she had to keep her feet wedged on the floor because she would have slid off it.
She took a lot of stick because, you know, she got a lot of stick she probably didn't ever deserved. You know, I mean, if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't ever been there.
No, she never took it the wrong way. You know, she was very good about it. One other evening, Doreen Nesbitt, who came to Listooder, came out from the hall to discover that her car had disappeared.
Like coming up the road, down the road, in a field or whatever, like, you know, it was never where she parked it, but like, thankfully we usually found it, like, you know, before to get home in, you know.
I seem to hear plenty about what Mum and Dad got up to at Listooder, especially Dad. That's probably part of the reason why, you know, we really wanted to go. It was like all this crack you had in Listooder. It's kind of, Dad seemed to be famous, especially moving cars and all the rest of it.
Andy was quiet and unassuming, but he was absolutely full of fun.
Judith Dick used to play the flute along with the piano for the singing.
We thought it would be funny to compromise Judith's flute, so I actually wasn't involved, but I was there.
John Hannah somehow put a bit of paper tissue inside Judith's flute without her knowing.
I noticed that Judith had left her flute case unattended at the front of the meeting. And so myself and Neil, although he will deny this, took a hanky and took her flute apart and poked it down the flute so she would have trouble playing it, shall we say.
And she got up and played, and obviously didn't sound quite right. And I think she stuck with it for a while.
She was like looking at it and all, and like we were like at the back killing ourselves.
And maybe a couple of minutes later, this was during one of the courses, she opened it up and just looked down it. And then, quick as a flash, like those sort of American movies when they put a gun back together, she seemed to take it apart, put it into the case, close it up, and just stormed out the door.
And slammed the door behind her. Now, obviously, I think, you know, after it was okay, you know.
There was a lot of apologising had to be done. I think there was even a mediator between the two parties. Of course, Neil just blamed it on me and moved on. Probably still blames it on me, but he was there. It may have even been his hanky.
In Listooder, it was like every week something different happened. I remember, I think Stephen and I were going out one week. The next week, Neil and Carolyn were going out, and also Helen and Stephen. And the next week, I think it was maybe Sharon and Ian. And the next week after that, I think it was like Christine Irvine and Jonny Ray. It's like, flip, this is a place to be.
That's where I met Sharon, my now wife, and, you know, it was very, very random. Sharon was, well, I don't want to say quite young, you know, because there is 7 years between us, but, you know, I think she was 16. Better just say that. But with my wonderful, I'm not going to say charisma, and I decided, oh, there's a nice looking girl there, you know. So how I met her, or got speaking to her, was I hit her over the head with a Coke bottle with my wonderful charm and, you know, whatever you want to call that.
Remember the one night in particular, there was two young men come in late, and I probably was quite pleased to see them, as one of them was Sandy.
It was certainly on his emphasis that we went along. Maybe he was expecting to see Roberta, I don't know. But yes, I do vaguely remember going that night, yeah.
And from that night on, we became an item, and it led to us getting married. And
so for us in a family, Listooder holds like it's a big deal, because if they hadn't went to Listooder, they probably would have never met one another.
I mean, different people came and went, but you don't forget them, you know. There's a sense in which you do remember them, and you remember their input, and you remember, you know, their fellowship.
My friendships in church didn't go beyond church, whereas my friendships in Listooder went beyond Listooder.
If Listooder had a rule book, right, it would be massive, right? So you have the constants. It's a bit like anything, really. You have the constants, but then you've got the people who would come in and out, you know, or whatever. So it wasn't necessarily the same people. Yes, the constants were there, but you know, oh, how you doing?
Seems to be Listooder does get a lot of people from different areas, and this last couple of years especially, the numbers have swelled really, really well, and I was surprised to see it, but it's great to see it. So I think it's more, it just people enjoy going to it, and yeah, if you don't enjoy going to something, you're not going to go.
Growing up in Listooder from sort of 11 onwards, I didn't really know of any other youth fellowships to compare it to at that age. And so I grew up with it, with all of its little, quirks. And it was only when I came to inviting other people to Listooder that I realised how different it was from other places.
You sort of were trying to explain to them, it's nothing exciting. It's a wee hall in the middle of the country with a latch door.
A group of young people who meet to, study God's Word and to have fellowship among them. So therefore, it's maybe easier for someone to come in that sense, and they don't have, there's nothing associated with any particular one denomination that might restrict it in any way. So I think it has that advantage.
It's just because if you invite someone to a church and you give them the denomination, they might sort of have a preconception of what way it is, whereas Listooder, they maybe don't know about it, so they don't know what way it is, and because you get different ministers and people to preach, they don't even have to be pastors, like Baptist and whatever denomination they are, they have a different way of putting it through, and people don't feel as uncomfortable if they're working in a very, very strict meeting, but still has good biblical value behind it.
It's not pretentious or anything about it. Listooder, it's a tin hut and there's wooden seats in it. You bring people to it, and I have brought numerous friends who have never been to any church or have no church background who they actually thought Listooder was a church. At Listooder, we didn't see it as a mission hall, we knew nothing of that. So Listooder, I have to be very thankful for every witness that Listooder has had, because it has offered the gospel to people in a way who would never have a chance to go to somewhere where they would say, no, that's a church, I will not go anywhere near that.
I don't have a problem with bringing anybody to Listooder. I think, now there's so many different ways to reach people. I mean, now you have the website and the way you can share the links on Facebook. You don't really feel like you have to text everybody. You kind of just like and share, and everybody knows about it,
I did the first version of the Listooder's website. It wasn't used because it was rubbish. But me and Graham Dick did the first version. I remember him doing getting Listooder.com and us doing it, and I helping him. And it was the first place I knew that had sent out text messages. It was the first place that ever sent out text messages. And I think that's why, we probably touched this, but that's why Listooder was different, because it knew, alright, we're a wee small hall, really in the back end of nowhere. Nobody, my granddad got lost taking me to Listooder one time. He's probably still, if you find him, he was driving a Marine Nova. If you find him, he's probably still driving around. Honestly, he got lost. I was able to get him there, no problem, because I was like, oh, you just got in this road. But he told me afterwards, he goes it took me ages to get home because he was totally lost. But Listooder knew, that it couldn't attract lots of people from around about, even though people did come. I remember people coming from Portadown and everywhere, But so it played its strength. So it's for you, young people use websites and you use texting, so we'll use that, and that's how we got more people.
They started bringing out the programme of the meetings, and whenever it started to come out, I always looked at the programme, and I looked down the list of the meetings it was on, and I knew I wasn't going to make them all, but there's maybe 3 or 4 that I looked at and I says, right, I'm definitely going to make them.
Its reach just is amazing, over the past 50 years. And I think you can see that clearly in the people from all around the world who listen to the podcasts, even today.
I had testified not too previous to that. I'd sort of testified. So anyway, I got talking to this friend of mine who is a Christian, and he says, I just listened to your testimony. I says, really? I says, where were you? Because it is on I think it's on our church website as well. Possibly here's a link. Anyway. He says, well, I was talking to this fella, Peter, we call him, right, this other fella. He says that he was doing a search one day. He was trying to figure out other gas men in the area. So he typed in, Ian Moore, gas, right? And what pops up? Your link to my testimony in Listooder, right? Because I said to the fella on the phone, Graham, I says, Graham, did it say Listooder? And, admittedly, Graham openly admitted, he says, I was crying listening to your testimony, right? Which meant a lot to me. He says, but the thing is, he says, Peter, this other fella, He says, he listened to the whole thing. And he didn't know anything about you. He said, but he listened to that whole thing. And he rung me and says, take a listen to this. And even that really, now, I've seen Peter a few times since, but it's been in a different environment, in some sort of wee functions and stuff, haven't had an opportunity. But even just that was such an encouragement to me.
To me, any work's always based on those who lead it. And those who lead a work have to be spiritual people. And they have to be people who are grounded in God's word.
Godly people who pray for the work, who have a vision. Like, who would think that a little tin hut would be broadcast across the world?
You knew these were people that you could trust. You know, they were thought well of in their communities. You know, they were hard workers and they were known to be sound Christians.
It was run by people your own age.
There was always young people at the head of it, you know, keeping in charge of it, and who tried to, well, facilitate the young people.
The leadership's, definitely in the background. Like, it's definitely very much in the background. It's, even though most weeks Stephen's getting up to announce, but you don't feel like he's the leader. He's just somebody else getting up. It's just one of us getting up there.
Yeah, you were not all together. Yes, okay. When push came to shove, William was the one in charge. But that never had to show, because everybody else had the respect and knew what needed to be done.
I think you're a bad leader if you have to let people know you are the leader. It was so good. I couldn't even say who the leader was back in those days, but I do know they had leaders.
It's like anything in life. You don't want to know how it's done. You just want to run smoothly. It's like a car. You might not understand how it works, but it works.
I don't think they ever did it for any sense of achievement or glory or whatever. But I think the best thanks ought to go to those who, in my day, who were leaders and current leaders, because the ministry is probably an impact on people's lives that eternity itself will only reveal.
You tell me how many more meetings are going for 50 years and still going strong. Like, I know it's probably has up and downs, like it's bound to.
The Listooders kept going no matter, it's evolved, I think, not move with the times, but just there's always people, you think, oh, it's quite small, because it was quite small whenever we started. But then it grew and grew and grew, and then you sort of wonder, will there always be the numbers coming through? But there always is.
It doesn't change on the fundamentals of, like, what we believe as born again Christians. It never wavers from that, like, and that's why it doesn't. That's why it works, because it honors the Lord in what it does.
It's kept that constant focus on the biblical teaching as being very much the centre of every meeting, and not seeking to reduce that down or squeeze that into a smaller section, and that it has kept that very much at the centre of it and the priority of it, and hasn't felt embarrassed or ashamed of that in terms of having to advertise this itself as something else and then squeeze a bit in at the end.
Glory has to go to God. It has to, because really there's nothing else to say. The little prayer meetings before the thing starts, prayer is vital for anything. You're relative to everybody's churches, prayer is important. Even though I'm sure there's people who don't go, there's people that still pray for the Listooder. When it's hard to remember everything, but you do remember the Listooder.
Been there for 50 years, and people have grown over those 50 years, and it's probably the prayer of God's people and the prayer of parents, whose children are attending it.
The only thing that you can, conclusion that you can draw from it is that the Lord has his hand upon it and that he has been making it work.
On paper, Listooder shouldn't work at all. It shouldn't work at all, but it does, and it's blessed by God. And it has been throughout those 50 years.
If a place is successful, it must be because God's got a blessing on it. It must be the Spirit of God at work in it. And obviously that has been the case over those 50 years for it to keep going. And to me, it's a real encouragement to know that the work's still going on, that there are still young people coming along there and being blessed and getting that same experience that we had the privilege, and it was a privilege.
I'd just like to see it continue for years to come, because I think now, and especially you said about youth rallies and different things, and there is less and less for young people to go to now, especially on Saturday night, and it's better than sitting in the house watching TV or doing things you shouldn't be doing. It's good fun, and I would recommend anyone, because I do love it, and I wish it went when I was younger, because I do enjoy it now, and I will continue to go for years. So I wish it all the success, and I hope the Lord blesses it for many years to come.